People disappear here more than anywhere else in America, and many are never recovered. Not deep in wilderness, but near routes that look safe, mapped, and familiar. Searches begin, locations are known, and then recovery stops not from lack of effort, but because the terrain quietly sets limits no one can cross. A map where distance stops being intuitive. From the air, the Sierra Nevada and the Alaska Range can appear similar in one narrow respect. Both form long, continuous walls of high ground broken by drainages that do not align cleanly with roads. On a printed map, both can seem close to towns, highways, or settlements. On the ground, usable routes narrow quickly, and movement slows in ways that are not obvious from above. In California, the Sierra Nevada is crossed by maintained passes and marked trails, bordered by national parks and designated wilderness with fixed access points. In Alaska, large sections of the backcountry begin immediately beyond pavement, docks, or gravel airstrips. Travel often continues by boat, snow machine, or small aircraft. In both places, the first facts recorded in a missing person file are usually plain. A truck left at a pullout, a float plane that did not arrive, a short message that names a creek or ridge without coordinates. When a person is reported missing inside a national park, the park unit with jurisdiction becomes the lead authority. Its law enforcement rangers manage the case and coordinate with state troopers, local agencies, or federal partners as needed. Each park operates within fixed limits defined by terrain, staffing, aircraft availability, and weather. In Alaska, those limits are broad. Denali National Park and Preserve maintains a permanent mountaineering patrol with experience on high-altitude routes where rescues are slow and technically demanding. Gates of the Arctic National Park and Preserve has no roads entering the park, and most visitors arrive by small aircraft landing on gravel bars or ridgelines. Wrangell Street, Elias National Park and Preserve spans multiple mountain ranges and river systems, covering an area larger than several U.S. states combined. In these places, distance is not measured only in miles, but in hours of daylight, fuel range, and the ability to return safely. The term unrecoverable does not appear as a formal category in most case files, but it is used operationally to describe an outcome. A search may be suspended when the probability of detection falls below a workable threshold, when conditions expose rescuers to unacceptable risk, or when no new information exists to refine the search area. In Alaska's national parks, search and rescue activity is documented in straightforward terms. Reports list the activity underway when the incident occurred, the injury or fatal event, and the resources deployed. Patterns emerge across years of these records. Aircraft are grounded by wind or low ceilings. Ground teams are limited by river crossings, dense brush, or avalanche terrain. Once time passes, tracks fade, scent trails dissipate, and snow or rain alters the landscape. Some Alaska backcountry cases remain part of the public record because recovery never occurred. On Denali, unrecovered remains are not unusual, and they are treated as part of the mountain's history rather than as anomalies. The 1967 Mount McKinley disaster involved multiple climbers caught in an extreme storm, resulting in fatalities that could not be retrieved. Contemporary accounts describe attempts to locate and bury the dead, but the bodies were not removed from the mountain. In later decades, individual climbers have fallen along established routes where the location of the accident was known. Witnesses were present, and response teams were available, yet recovery was not possible. These cases are recorded without speculation. Elevation, slope angle, and exposure determine what can be reached and what cannot. At lower elevations, the same outcome often reflects scale rather than altitude. In parks, such as Wrangell Street, Elias, search areas can extend across valleys and foothills that have no trail network and no consistent landmarks. Rivers braid and shift from season to season. Game trails intersect and disappear. A hunter reported missing in the park's northern region was eventually located along a remote creek, but only after conditions allowed access and time had passed. That recovery depended on specific circumstances aligning. In many other incidents, similar searches cover hundreds of square miles with no definitive endpoint. When those searches are suspended, the case remains open in records, but the terrain remains unchanged. Outside the national parks, Alaska maintains a statewide system for tracking missing persons. The Alaska Bureau of Investigation operates a clearinghouse that records reported cases and connects them to national databases. This system covers cities, highways, villages, rivers, and remote regions. The Alaska backcountry is not limited to recreational wilderness. It includes subsistence routes used for generations, winter trails that exist only when rivers freeze, and long stretches between communities where travel is infrequent. Response times are shaped by weather, darkness, and aircraft availability. In recent reporting periods, state summaries have counted hundreds of missing person reports filed across Alaska within short timeframes. These figures include cases that are resolved quickly and others that remain open. They do not explain circumstances, they show volume. National comparisons are often cited to give context. Some reports have listed Alaska as having the highest missing person rate per capita among U.S. states in certain years. Those rankings depend on how cases are counted and reported. They do not separate wilderness incidents from urban ones, and they do not indicate how many cases involve long-term non-recovery. What they do show is that Alaska consistently appears at the top of such lists, drawing attention to the state's geography and the administrative challenge of tracking people across vast, sparsely populated areas. The idea of a corridor is practical rather than abstract. It refers to the places where people consistently enter remote terrain. In the Sierra Nevada, these points are typically paved trailheads, seasonal mountain roads, and permit stations. In Alaska, entry points more often include gravel airstrips, river landings, and informal staging areas near small towns or villages. Between these points, there is steady seasonal movement. Workers travel north for short-term jobs. Hunters and anglers move into the backcountry during narrow windows. Climbers arrive when snow conditions allow access to routes that are impassable at other times. The documentation for these trips is routine. Tickets, fuel receipts, gear lists, brief messages sent before signal fades. When something goes wrong, those ordinary records become the outer edges of a search area. A parked vehicle establishes a last known direction. A missed radio check suggests a window of time. A flight plan fixes an intended route that may or may not have been followed. From there, the terrain takes over. Rivers split, ridges block sightlines. Weather moves through without regard to schedules or plan. The map remains accurate, but distance behaves differently once movement is confined to footpaths, riverbanks, and air corridors shaped by wind and visibility. The landscape does not announce where recovery will stop. It only sets conditions, quietly and consistently, long before a report is filed, and long after active searching ends. The first report is usually incomplete. A missing person report rarely begins with a clear timeline. It usually starts with a gap. Someone did not return when expected. A call was not answered. A flight did not arrive at a scheduled strip. The report is often made by a friend, a family member, an air taxi operator, or a park employee who notices a vehicle that has remained in the same place for too long. The initial information reflects what is immediately visible, not what actually happened. Times are estimated. Locations are described using local terms that are not marked on official maps. In Alaska, many reports are delayed by circumstance rather than neglect. A hiker or hunter may not be considered overdue until days have passed, especially in areas where trips are planned to last a week or more. Weather can prevent communication entirely. In winter, darkness extends for most of the day, and travel plans are often flexible by necessity. When a report is finally made, the last confirmed contact may already be several days old. That delay shapes every decision that follows. The first official record often comes through the Alaska State Troopers or a National Park Service law enforcement office, depending on where the person was last known to be. The intake process is procedural. Identifying information is logged. Clothing descriptions are written down as provided. Equipment lists are recorded if they are available. These lists are rarely complete. People forget items or misremember what was packed. In remote travel, gear changes frequently in response to conditions. A jacket left behind, a pack lightened, a route altered to avoid weather. The report captures a snapshot that may already be outdated. Location data is treated carefully. A last known location may mean a trailhead, a river landing, a campsite mentioned in a message, or a general plan described before departure. In many cases, it does not represent a confirmed position. It represents the last place where the person was known to be alive and accounted for by someone else. In Alaska's backcountry, the distance between that point and where the person actually traveled can be significant. Rivers meander, trails are informal, game paths intersect and diverge. A planned route may never have been followed. Communication records are examined early, but they are often limited. Satellite devices may show a last ping without context. Cell phones may connect briefly to towers near towns or highways, then go silent. Messages sent from the field are often short and practical. At the lake, weather slow, heading back tomorrow. These messages are not designed to document precise movement. They provide reassurance rather than data. When they become evidence, their meaning is narrow. The first response is shaped by jurisdiction and availability. If the incident is outside park boundaries, state troopers evaluate resources and coordinate with local search groups. Volunteer search and rescue teams play a role in many areas, bringing local knowledge of terrain and travel patterns. Aircraft are requested if weather allows. Ground teams are assembled based on access points that can be reached safely. Time is recorded carefully, but it does not move evenly across the landscape. A search initiated within 24 hours in one area may still take days to reach the relevant terrain. Rivers may be too high to cross. Snow conditions may prevent landing. Fog may settle into valleys and remain there. During this period, the report remains incomplete, even as activity increases. New information arrives slowly, often through secondary sources. A store clerk remembers a purchase. A pilot recalls dropping someone off earlier than scheduled. A trail register entry is found with a date but no time. Search planners work with probability rather than certainty. They outline areas based on known behavior patterns, terrain features, and the limited facts available. These plans are adjusted as conditions change. In Alaska, the scale of the environment forces early decisions about where not to search. Entire drainages may be excluded simply because they cannot be reached without unacceptable risk. These exclusions are not judgments about likelihood. They are operational constraints. Weather reports are treated as primary documents. Wind direction, precipitation, and temperature affect both movement and survival. A storm that passed through an area 2 days earlier may explain why tracks disappeared or why a planned route was abandoned. At the same time, weather can delay the search itself. Aircraft remain grounded, crews wait. The report grows thicker with notes, but the central gap remains. Interviews conducted in the first days often reflect uncertainty. Witnesses provide partial accounts. Time estimates vary. Directions are described using landmarks that shift with perspective. A ridge to the left depends on where the speaker was standing. A short walk may mean an hour or a day. These statements are recorded without interpretation. They are revisited later as patterns emerge or fail to emerge. In some cases, physical evidence appears quickly. A campsite is found. A piece of equipment is located along a riverbank. These findings add detail, but they also introduce new questions. An item left behind could indicate injury, fatigue, or a deliberate choice to lighten a load. Without context, it does not point clearly in one direction. The report expands, but clarity does not necessarily follow. The administrative side of the process continues alongside field activity. Case numbers are assigned. Information is entered into state and national databases. Photographs are collected if they exist. Dental records or fingerprints may be requested in long-term cases. These steps are methodical and quiet. They do not change conditions on the ground, but they ensure that the person's identity and circumstances are preserved accurately in official systems. As days pass, the language of the report shifts slightly. Phrases such as last known and believed to be appear more often. These terms reflect the absence of confirmation rather than the presence of theory. They are used to mark the limits of knowledge at each stage. In Alaska's backcountry, those limits are reached quickly and persist. The first report does not define the outcome of a case, but it defines the framework within which all later actions occur. Its gaps influence search areas, resource allocation, and risk assessments. Once written, it becomes a reference point that is consulted repeatedly, even as new information is added. The original uncertainties remain visible, embedded in the record. Movement through remote terrain continues regardless of reporting. Rivers keep flowing. Weather systems pass through. Snow accumulates or melts. Tracks disappear. The landscape does not preserve events in a stable way. By the time a report is complete enough to feel substantial, the conditions it describes may no longer exist. Search areas are drawn larger than expected. The first map used in a search is rarely the last. It is usually created quickly, based on what little is known at the time, and then revised repeatedly as conditions and assumptions change. In remote terrain, especially in Alaska, early search boundaries tend to expand rather than narrow. This expansion does not reflect uncertainty alone. It reflects how movement actually occurs in landscapes without fixed routes. A search area often begins at a single point. This may be a parked vehicle, a landing strip, a riverbank, or a campsite named in a message. From that point, planners consider how a person could have moved, given the terrain, the season, and the equipment they were likely carrying. In many cases, there is no single obvious direction. Valleys branch. Ridges run parallel for miles. Rivers offer both pathways and barriers, depending on water level and weather. What looks contained on a map can open outward once elevation and ground cover are considered. In Alaska, terrain does not funnel movement in predictable ways. A person traveling on foot may follow a river upstream until brush becomes impassable, then cut laterally across a slope to avoid it. A hunter tracking game may leave a drainage entirely, crossing low divides that are not marked on maps. In winter, frozen rivers become highways, while summer travel along the same routes may be slow or impossible. Search planners account for these variables by outlining zones of possible travel rather than fixed routes. Each zone adds area. Distance is calculated differently in these settings. A mile across flat tundra may take an hour. A mile through alder thickets or across glacial moraine may take most of a day. Search teams measure effort in time and exposure rather than mileage. When planners estimate how far a person could have traveled, they consider physical condition, pack weight, weather at the time, and daylight hours. These estimates are conservative by necessity. It is easier to reduce a search area later than to realize too late that an area was never covered. Aerial searching plays a central role early on, but it also contributes to expansion. From the air, features appear connected that are separated on the ground by cliffs, brush, or water. Pilots and observers identify drainages, benches, and open areas that could support travel or shelter. Each feature becomes a potential location, even if reaching it on foot would be difficult. When visibility is good, aircraft can cover large areas quickly, revealing how much terrain lies beyond the initial assumptions. When visibility is poor, aircraft may only be able to search narrow corridors, leaving large adjacent areas unobserved. Search maps often show probability zones shaded by color or intensity. These zones are based on models that incorporate terrain, behavior patterns, and time since last contact. In Alaska, these models are adjusted frequently because standard assumptions do not always apply. Pilots may divert from planned routes to avoid weather. Each deviation widens the area that must be considered. Ground searches move more slowly and reveal different information. Teams follow likely travel corridors, checking riverbanks, game trails, and sheltered areas where someone might stop. As teams move, they confirm which areas are passable and which are not. A ridge assumed to be a barrier may turn out to be a viable crossing. A valley assumed to be open may be blocked by water or brush. Each confirmation alters the map. Sometimes it reduces uncertainty. Sometimes it adds new options that must be accounted for. In large parks such as Wrangell Street, Elias, or Gates of the Arctic, access limits play a decisive role. Some areas cannot be reached safely by ground teams within a reasonable time frame. Others require aircraft insertion, which depends on weather and landing conditions. When planners decide where to deploy limited teams, they prioritize areas based on probability and feasibility. Areas that cannot be searched immediately remain on the map as unresolved space. This unresolved space contributes to the sense of expansion, even if no teams enter it. Search boundaries are also influenced by human activity unrelated to the missing person. Trails, cabins, mining remnants, and seasonal camps are noted as potential contact points. In Alaska, many of these features are informal and unmarked. A cabin used intermittently may not appear on official maps. A river camp may exist only during certain months. Searchers include these locations because they represent places where someone might seek shelter or assistance. Each inclusion adds area and complexity. As time passes, planners reassess assumptions about movement, fatigue, injury, or weather exposure may limit how far someone could have traveled. At the same time, survival behavior may lead to unexpected decisions. Someone may descend into a drainage rather than climb out of it. They may follow water instead of terrain features. These considerations do not narrow the search automatically. They shift emphasis within an already large area. In some cases, new information forces rapid expansion. A sighting reported days later may place the person miles from the original zone. A piece of equipment found downstream may indicate travel by water rather than on foot. These developments require planners to redraw boundaries quickly, sometimes doubling the search area. Such expansions are not treated as failures. They are treated as adjustments to new data. The scale of Alaska amplifies these effects. A search area that expands by 10 square miles in a lower 48 state park may still be manageable. The same expansion in Alaska may encompass terrain that takes days to reach and cannot be searched thoroughly in a single season. When snow falls or rivers freeze, the character of the area changes again. Some zones become accessible only in winter. Others disappear beneath ice or snowpack. Documentation reflects this process in restrained language. Maps are updated. Notes record which drainages were searched, which were observed from the air, and which remain unexamined. There is no single moment when a search area stops growing and starts shrinking. Expansion and refinement occur simultaneously, shaped by conditions rather than intent. The practical result is that early expectations about containment rarely hold. What begins as a localized search around a known point becomes a regional effort that accounts for multiple paths and behaviors. The map grows more detailed, but also more complex. Lines multiply, shaded zones overlap, white spaces remain. The terrain does not signal where its limits lie. It presents options continuously, some obvious, others subtle. Search areas follow those options outward, constrained only by safety, resources, and time. Access determines what is actually searched. A search map can include thousands of acres, but only a fraction of that space is ever entered. The difference between what exists on paper and what can be reached in practice shapes every operation. In Alaska's backcountry, access is not assumed. It is evaluated repeatedly, sometimes hour by hour, as conditions change. The first constraint is transportation. Roads define movement in most parts of the United States, but large sections of Alaska have none. Access begins with aircraft, boats, or seasonal trails. Fixed-wing aircraft require gravel bars, frozen lakes, or maintained strips. Helicopters depend on visibility, wind, fuel range, and safe landing zones. Boats are limited by water level, current speed, and ice. Snow machines and tracked vehicles operate only when ground conditions allow. Each method opens some terrain and closes other terrain at the same time. Weather acts as a gatekeeper. Low ceilings can prevent aircraft from flying for days. Wind can make ridgelines unsafe for landing. Rain can raise rivers beyond safe crossing levels. Snow can conceal hazards or make travel possible where it was not before. These factors are not abstract risks. They are recorded daily in briefings and logs, and they determine whether a planned search assignment proceeds or is postponed. A location that appears reachable on a clear map may remain inaccessible throughout an entire search period. Ground access introduces its own limits. Dense alder thickets slow movement to a crawl. Tundra that appears flat can be saturated with water, turning each step into effort. Glacial terrain requires specialized equipment and experience. River crossings change hourly with temperature and precipitation. Teams evaluate routes continuously, sometimes turning back after covering only a short distance. Progress is measured in yards rather than miles. In these conditions, covering an area thoroughly may take far longer than planners initially estimate. Search teams are assembled based on skill sets as much as availability. Technical terrain requires climbers trained in rope systems. Swiftwater areas require personnel experienced in river travel. Aviation-supported teams must coordinate closely with pilots. These requirements reduce flexibility. Not every team can be sent everywhere. Assignments are matched to capability, which means some areas remain unsearched simply because the right combination of people and conditions never aligns. Insertion and extraction matter as much as the search itself. A team may reach a ridge or valley, complete its assignment, and then wait hours or days for extraction due to weather. This waiting period ties up resources. Aircraft remain committed. Crews cannot be redeployed. Planners factor this into decisions about where to send teams next. Areas that would require long insertions with uncertain extraction are sometimes deferred in favor of zones that can be accessed and exited more reliably. In Alaska's national parks, wilderness regulations also shape access. Motorized equipment is restricted in certain areas. Landing zones are limited. These rules exist to preserve the character of the land, but they also affect response options. Emergency exceptions can be made, but they do not eliminate physical constraints. Even when allowed, aircraft still need suitable conditions. Ground teams still need safe routes. Visibility plays a critical role. From the air, dense vegetation can obscure the ground entirely. Shadows hide depressions. Water reflects light in ways that conceal objects along banks. Aerial observers adjust search patterns based on sun angle and cloud cover. When visibility is poor, flights may still occur, but coverage is incomplete. Areas flown over are marked as observed rather than searched, a distinction that carries weight in planning discussions. Seasonal change alters access more dramatically in Alaska than in most places. Summer opens rivers but closes snow routes. Winter opens frozen corridors but limits daylight and increases cold exposure risk. Shoulder seasons bring instability. Ice is thin, snow is patchy. Aircraft landing conditions are unpredictable. Some searches pause during these periods, not because effort has ended, but because movement is unsafe. When operations resume, the terrain may present a different set of options than before. Human infrastructure within search areas is sparse and inconsistent. Cabins, shelters, and old mining structures may exist but are not always maintained or mapped. Some are accessible only by specific routes. Others may be snowed in or flooded. Search teams note these structures because they represent potential shelter, but reaching them can be as difficult as reaching any other point in the terrain. Their presence does not guarantee accessibility. Access decisions are documented carefully. Logs note which areas were physically entered, which were observed from a distance, and which remain unreachable. These distinctions matter later when cases are reviewed. A location marked on a map does not imply coverage. It implies consideration. The record shows what was possible at the time, not what was desired. In some cases, access improves unexpectedly. A break in weather allows flights. Water levels drop. Snow hardens, making travel easier. When this happens, planners may reopen areas previously set aside. Teams are redeployed. Old assumptions are revisited. Conversely, access can deteriorate suddenly. A storm may ground aircraft indefinitely. A river may rise overnight. Routes that were passable become hazardous. Flexibility is built into planning, but it operates within narrow margins. Public perception often assumes that search areas are swept thoroughly once identified. In practice, coverage varies widely. Some zones receive repeated passes by aircraft and multiple ground teams. Others are seen only briefly or not at all. This unevenness is not a failure of effort. It is a reflection of access realities. Search managers prioritize based on probability, safety, and feasibility. Areas that cannot be entered safely remain unresolved. Access limitations also influence how long searches continue. As time passes, the cost and risk of entering difficult terrain increases. Crews face fatigue. Weather windows close. Daylight shortens. When searches are suspended, it is often because remaining areas require access that cannot be justified given the available information. The map may still show large unsearched zones, but the operational reality has narrowed. Technology offers some mitigation, but does not eliminate these constraints. Drones extend visual reach, but are limited by range, weather, and battery life. Satellite imagery provides context, but lacks immediacy. Personal locator beacons and tracking devices help when they are used and functioning, but they are not universal. Even when data exists, reaching the indicated location may still be impossible. The difference between mapped space and search space remains one of the defining features of Alaska backcountry cases. It is recorded quietly in operational notes and after-action reports. The language is precise and restrained, unable to access. Conditions unsafe. Area observed only. These phrases accumulate, marking the boundary between intention and reality. Terrain does not yield evenly to effort. Some places allow entry, passage, and exit with planning and patience. Others resist, regardless of preparation. Search operations proceed within these limits, expanding and contracting as access allows. What remains unsearched is not forgotten. It is acknowledged as part of the environment, persistent and unchanged. Time alters both evidence and effort. Time enters a search quietly. It does not arrive as a single turning point, but as a series of small changes that accumulate. In remote terrain, those changes affect both what remains to be found and how people are able to look for it. The passage of time does not move uniformly across a landscape. Some traces vanish within hours. Others persist for weeks. The effort required to continue searching increases, even as the available information becomes less precise. Physical evidence is the first to change. Footprints in soft ground can disappear after one night of rain. Snow preserves tracks briefly, then erases them through wind or melt. Riverbanks shift as water levels rise and fall, rearranging debris and smoothing disturbed soil. In forested areas, vegetation rebounds quickly. Bent grass straightens. Broken branches are obscured by new growth or snowfall. These changes do not indicate direction or outcome. They reduce the number of observable markers that can be followed with confidence. Scent behaves in similar ways. Search dogs rely on scent trails that degrade rapidly in moving air, sunlight, and precipitation. In Alaska, weather patterns accelerate this process. Strong winds disperse scent across wide areas. Rain dilutes it. Cold temperatures slow decay, but also limit how scent adheres to frozen surfaces. Handlers document these effects carefully, adjusting expectations about where and how dogs can be used. As days pass, scent-based searching becomes less reliable. even if conditions briefly improve. Personal items persist unevenly. Fabric degrades slowly in cold environments but can be buried by snow or concealed by vegetation. Hard objects may remain visible for years if they are not moved by water or human activity. However, visibility depends on position. An item resting in open tundra may be spotted from the air. The same item in brush or shadow may never be seen. Time increases the chance that objects shift location, especially near waterways or on slopes. Environmental exposure alters remains in ways that complicate identification and recovery. In cold regions, preservation can occur, but freeze-thaw cycles damage tissue and scatter material. In warmer seasons, animals interact with remains quickly. Scavenging does not follow predictable patterns. It redistributes evidence across distances that vary by species and terrain. These processes are recorded in forensic assessments, but they limit what can be concluded when remains are eventually found. While evidence changes on the ground, effort changes within the search organization. Personnel rotate in and out. Volunteers return to regular work. Specialized teams are reassigned to other incidents. Fatigue accumulates among those who remain. Search managers track hours, exposure, and rest requirements. As days extend into weeks, maintaining the same level of intensity becomes difficult. This shift is logistical rather than emotional. It reflects the limits of staffing and safety. Weather windows narrow over time. In Alaska, seasonal transitions are abrupt. Summer searches may face increasing storms and shorter daylight. Winter searches contend with cold exposure and limited visibility. As seasons change, access routes close or reopen, altering where effort can be applied. A search paused in late fall may resume months later under entirely different conditions, with new routes available and old ones gone. Administrative processes also evolve with time. Case files grow thicker. Logs accumulate entries that document each decision and observation. Maps are archived and updated. Databases are checked periodically for matches. These actions continue even when field operations slow. They ensure continuity, but they do not restore lost evidence. They preserve what is known at each stage. Public reporting changes as well. Initial notices may include photographs and descriptions circulated widely. As time passes without resolution, updates become less frequent. This does not signal abandonment. It reflects the transition from active searching to long-term tracking. The case remains open, but the mode of attention shifts. In Alaska, some cases re-enter public awareness years later due to unrelated discoveries or environmental changes. Time also affects interpretation. Early assumptions about movement or survival are revisited as conditions change. A route thought unlikely may become more plausible after snow reveals terrain contours. Conversely, an area searched thoroughly early on may be reconsidered if evidence suggests later movement. These reassessments are documented without narrative emphasis. They are part of routine review. In some instances, time enables discovery. Glacial retreat exposes objects long buried. Spring melt reveals items carried by winter snowpack. Erosion uncovers material previously concealed. These events occur independently of search activity. When discoveries are made, they are evaluated against existing records to determine relevance. Time does not guarantee answers, but it occasionally changes what is visible. Legal and procedural considerations remain stable throughout. Jurisdiction does not expire. Records are retained. Families may request updates periodically, and agencies respond within the limits of available information. Time does not resolve uncertainty. It alters the context in which uncertainty exists. Search effort adapts rather than ends. Active field operations may cease, but monitoring continues. Reports are revisited. New information is assessed. In Alaska's backcountry, this extended timeline is common. The environment sets the pace, not the investigation. The gradual accumulation of change defines this phase. Evidence fades, access shifts, resources adjust. What remains constant is the record, capturing each moment as it occurred. Without revision, terrain shapes movement more than intention. Movement in remote terrain follows physical limits rather than plans. Once a person leaves a marked road, dock, or airstrip, intention becomes secondary to slope, vegetation, water, and visibility. In Alaska, this shift happens quickly. Routes that appear straightforward on maps often dissolve into a series of forced choices made in response to the ground itself. Rivers are the most influential features. They cut long corridors through otherwise complex terrain and offer relatively open travel compared to surrounding forest or tundra. In summer, riverbanks are often used as informal pathways, even when water levels fluctuate. In winter, frozen rivers become primary travel routes for snow machines, skis, and foot traffic. This dual role makes rivers both connectors and traps. A person following a river may cover significant distance without intending to, carried by ease of movement rather than direction. When conditions change, the same river can become impassable, forcing abrupt decisions that alter travel entirely. Elevation plays a quieter but equally decisive role. Valleys invite movement, ridges resist it. Climbing requires energy, time, and clear weather. Descending may seem easier but can lead into dense brush, cliffs, or dead-end drainages. In Alaska's mountain ranges, slopes that look gradual from a distance often steepen unexpectedly. Snowfields conceal crevasses. Talus shifts underfoot. These features channel movement into specific bands of elevation where travel is possible, regardless of where someone intended to go. Vegetation exerts constant pressure on route choice. Alder, willow, and spruce form dense barriers in many regions. These thickets slow progress dramatically and limit visibility to a few feet. People encountering them tend to divert toward open ground, even if that means leaving a planned route. Over time, repeated avoidance creates informal corridors that are not marked on maps. Search teams account for these patterns by studying aerial imagery and local knowledge, but individual choices made in the field remain difficult to predict. In tundra environments, the absence of trees does not equate to ease of travel. Ground may be uneven, waterlogged, or undercut by frost heaves. Small changes in elevation can hide pools of standing water. Footing is inconsistent. Travel speed varies widely depending on season and temperature. In these areas, people often follow animal paths without realizing it, drawn by slightly firmer ground or clearer lines of travel. These paths lead where the terrain allows, not where a map suggests. Weather interacts continuously with terrain. Fog reduces visibility, encouraging travel along features that can be followed by touch or sound, such as riverbanks or slopes. Wind influences movement along ridgelines, sometimes forcing descent into sheltered areas. Rain alters soil stability, increasing the risk of slips on steep ground. Snow smooths surfaces while concealing hazard. Each condition shifts the balance of what feels navigable in the moment. In Alaska, intention is often adjusted repeatedly during travel. Plans made before departure are modified to avoid weather, conserve energy, or respond to obstacles. A person may aim for a lake but stop short due to terrain difficulty. They may descend into a drainage to find easier footing, then continue downstream farther than expected. These adjustments accumulate. Over hours or days, the distance between plan and reality grows. Search records reflect this divergence. Planners examine terrain features rather than stated destinations. They consider where someone would likely go when faced with specific obstacles. A planned ridge traverse may give way to a valley descent. A direct route may be abandoned in favor of a longer but less demanding path. These assessments are grounded in experience rather than assumption. They are revised as new information emerges. Water crossings introduce additional variability. Streams that appear shallow may deepen suddenly. Glacial melt increases flow during warm afternoons. Crossing points change daily. People may follow water upstream to find narrower sections, then overshoot familiar landmarks. Once across, returning the same way may not be possible. This dynamic pushes movement into new areas that were not part of the original plan. Human structures exert limited influence in much of Alaska. Trails are sparse and often informal. Cabins and shelters exist but are not evenly distributed. Their locations may not align with natural travel corridors. A person may know of a cabin but be unable to reach it due to intervening terrain. Conversely, someone may encounter an unmarked structure unexpectedly and change plans accordingly. These interactions are incidental rather than guiding. In mountainous regions, gravity becomes a constant factor. Downhill travel conserves energy but reduces options. Once committed to a descent, climbing back out may exceed available strength or daylight. This leads to continued movement along lower ground, often into more complex terrain. Search teams note this pattern when assessing likely movement paths. It does not guarantee direction, but it influences probability. In cold conditions, terrain dictates shelter choices. Wind exposure on ridges encourages descent into trees or depressions. Snow accumulation favors leeward slopes. These choices affect where someone might stop or remain for extended periods. They also affect visibility from the air. Sheltered areas are harder to observe, even when searched repeatedly. Terrain-driven movement applies equally to experienced and inexperienced travelers. Familiarity with the landscape reduces risk but does not remove constraints. Guides and long-time residents still adapt routes in response to conditions. Search records include cases involving professionals who deviated from plans due to terrain and weather. Experience influences decision-making, but it does not override physical limits. Maps and GPS devices provide reference but not control. Devices may encourage persistence toward a destination even when terrain suggests diversion. When devices fail or lose signal, reliance shifts entirely to environmental cues. Movement follows what is visible and passable. Over time, terrain leaves subtle records of passage: disturbed vegetation, shifted stones, compressed snow. These signs are transient. They disappear as conditions change. When found, they offer brief insight into movement shaped by the land rather than by plan. Understanding these patterns requires attention to geography rather than narrative. Search planning in Alaska prioritizes terrain analysis because it reflects how movement actually occurs. Intention initiates travel, but terrain completes it. The land does not guide evenly. It presents options that vary by moment and location. People move within those options, adjusting continuously. The resulting paths rarely match what was imagined beforehand. Human presence is sparser than it appears. On most maps, Alaska looks populated by place names. Towns, rivers, mountains, and airstrips are labeled closely enough to suggest continuity. In practice, these labels do not reflect sustained human presence. Many named locations are uninhabited for most of the year. Others see activity only during narrow seasonal windows. Between them lie long stretches of land where no one passes for weeks or months at a time. Population density figures illustrate this unevenness. Alaska's overall population is concentrated in a small number of urban areas, primarily along the road system in the south-central region. Beyond these corridors, density drops sharply. Large regions have fewer than one person per square mile, and some have effectively none. National parks and preserves account for significant portions of this space, but even outside protected areas, settlement remains sparse. Villages are separated by rivers, mountains, and tundra rather than roads. Travel between them is purposeful, not continuous. Movement through remote areas tends to follow predictable rhythms. Summer brings seasonal workers, hunters, anglers, and tourists. Winter brings subsistence travel along frozen routes and limited recreational use. Shoulder seasons see sharp declines in activity as conditions become unstable. During these periods, entire regions may see no human traffic beyond occasional aircraft overhead. A missing person in such an area is unlikely to be encountered by chance. Trails do not function as they do in more developed regions. Many routes are informal, created by repeated use rather than construction. They may be visible one year and vanish the next. Snow, vegetation, growth, and erosion alter them constantly. Without maintenance, they do not reliably channel movement. Someone traveling off these routes may not intersect another traveler, even if both are moving through the same general area. Aircraft provide the most consistent form of transit across vast distances, but their presence is brief. A plane lands, unloads, departs. The time spent on the ground is often measured in minutes. Pilots follow specific corridors, dictated by terrain and weather. They do not survey the ground below continuously. Sightings from the air depend on visibility, angle, and timing. An object or person may be present one moment and obscured the next. Rivers create similar patterns. Boats move along main channels during certain seasons, stopping at known locations. Side channels and tributaries receive far less traffic. A person traveling along a smaller branch may remain unseen even when activity occurs nearby. Water levels further restrict use. High water discourages travel. Low water limits access. These fluctuations create windows of presence separated by long absences. Cabins and shelters are unevenly distributed. Some are used regularly, others are visited sporadically or abandoned entirely. Their locations may be known only to local residents or not at all. A person encountering such a structure cannot assume it will be occupied or that assistance is available. Conversely, someone passing nearby may never notice it. These structures do not guarantee overlap between travelers. Search records reflect this scarcity. In many cases, teams note that no other parties were in the area during the relevant time frame. Trail registers show few entries. Air taxi logs indicate isolated drop-offs with no subsequent flights. When searches expand, they often do so into areas with no documented human activity at all. The absence of witnesses becomes a defining feature. Even in areas perceived as popular, timing matters. A trail used heavily in July may be empty in September. A hunting area active during a specific season may be vacant before and after. Search planners consider these patterns when evaluating the likelihood of incidental discovery. An area with high seasonal use may still have long intervals of complete inactivity. Infrastructure does not fill these gaps. Cell towers are limited to populated corridors. Radio repeaters cover only certain areas. Emergency services are stationed far apart. Response relies on mobilization rather than proximity. When a report is made, there may be no one nearby who saw or heard anything relevant. The record begins with absence. Human perception tends to overestimate presence. A map suggests continuity where none exists. A name on a chart implies familiarity. In Alaska, naming often reflects exploration history rather than settlement. A creek or ridge may bear a name without ever having supported sustained travel. These names persist long after activity has ceased. This scarcity affects discovery in subtle ways. Items left behind may remain undisturbed for years. Campsites do not attract attention unless someone passes nearby. Tracks may go unobserved even if they persist briefly. Wildlife encounters with evidence occur without human witnesses. When remains are eventually found, it is often due to environmental change rather than human passage. Search managers factor this into planning. They do not assume that areas will be checked incidentally. Active searching must account for the likelihood that no one else will enter the area during the search period. This reality increases the burden on organized efforts and heightens the importance of initial coverage. The difference between apparent and actual presence also shapes expectations outside the search itself. Families may assume that someone will be found because the area is known or named. Officials understand that naming does not equate to monitoring. The landscape remains largely unsupervised. In some cases, increased human activity arrives long after a disappearance. Development, resource exploration, or recreational growth brings people into previously unused areas. Discoveries may occur under these circumstances, but they are not the result of sustained overlap. They are incidental outcomes of change. For long stretches of time, however, the land remains quiet. Movement occurs without witnesses. Objects remain where they fall. The absence of people is not dramatic. It is routine. It defines how long uncertainty can persist. This sparsity does not vary by intent or experience. Skilled travelers and casual visitors alike move through the same empty spaces. Their paths may never intersect with another human presence. The probability of encounter remains low regardless of preparation. Understanding this condition requires adjusting assumptions. Alaska's backcountry is not continuously occupied. It is intermittently visited. Searchers operate within that reality, knowing that discovery depends almost entirely on deliberate effort rather than chance. Records outlast searches. When field activity slows, the work does not stop. It changes form. Search operations produce documents at every stage, and those documents persist long after teams leave the terrain. In Alaska, unresolved cases often exist primarily as records, maintained across years by agencies that may never return to the original location. The initial case file begins with intake forms, call logs, and early notes from responding officers or rangers. These records capture the first known facts as they were reported, not as they are later understood. Times are logged, descriptions are preserved, early uncertainties remain visible rather than corrected. This permanence matters because later interpretations depend on what was recorded at the start, not on what might have been assumed afterward. As searches proceed, documentation expands. Daily operational logs record weather, team assignments, areas entered, and areas observed. Maps are annotated with dates and methods of coverage. A drainage marked as searched by air carries a different meaning from one marked as ground search completed. These distinctions are preserved carefully. They allow future reviewers to understand not only what was done, but how it was done and under what conditions. In Alaska, where searches often involve multiple agencies, records are shared across jurisdictions. National Park Service files may be supplemented by Alaska State Trooper reports. Volunteer search organizations maintain their own logs. Aviation providers keep flight records that indicate drop-off and pickup times. These parallel records are not always merged into a single document. Instead, they exist as related sets, connected by case numbers and dates. When active searching ends, a formal decision is recorded. This decision does not close the case. It suspends field operations. The language used is precise. Phrases such as "search suspended pending new information" or "no further action planned at this time" appear frequently. They indicate a shift in effort rather than an endpoint. the case remains open in administrative systems. Long-term records are maintained through centralized databases. In Alaska, missing person cases are entered into state and national systems that allow cross-referencing over time. These entries include identifying information, circumstances of disappearance, and case status. They are updated if new information emerges, even years later. The persistence of these records allows connections to be made that were not possible at the time of disappearance. Periodic review is part of this process. Agencies revisit unresolved cases to ensure information remains current. This may involve checking for new reports, advances in forensic methods, or changes in the environment that could affect discovery. Reviews are often brief and procedural. They confirm that the case remains unresolved and that no new leads have emerged. The absence of updates is itself recorded. Physical evidence associated with cases is stored according to standard protocols. Items recovered during searches are catalogued, labeled, and retained when appropriate. Clothing, equipment, or personal effects may be held indefinitely. In some cases, items are released to families. In others, they remain in evidence storage due to their potential relevance. The decision is documented, along with the rationale. Records also include correspondence. Families receive notifications at various stages. Requests for information are logged. Responses are standardized to ensure consistency. These communications do not speculate. They restate known facts and current status. Over time, the tone remains factual, even as years pass without resolution. Changes in technology affect how records are used. Older cases may have been documented on paper, with hand-drawn maps and typed reports. These materials are often digitized later, preserving original content while making it searchable. Newer cases generate digital data from the start, including GPS tracks, satellite imagery references, and electronic communication logs. Environmental change occasionally brings records back into focus. Glacial retreat, erosion, or development can lead to discoveries that prompt case reviews. When remains or personal items are found, investigators compare them against existing files. Dates, locations, and descriptions are cross-checked. In some instances, identification is possible only because records were preserved accurately decades earlier. Unresolved cases also appear in public-facing reports and summaries. Annual statistics may include counts of open cases. These summaries do not provide detail. They serve to track volume and trends rather than individual outcomes. In Alaska, such reporting underscores how many cases remain open at any given time, without assigning cause. The persistence of records affects how searches are understood after the fact. A case with extensive documentation may appear thorough, even if large areas were never accessed. Conversely, a brief file may reflect limited opportunity rather than limited effort. Reviewers rely on what is written, not on what was imagined. This reliance places weight on precise language and careful logging. Training materials for search managers often draw on past case files. Scenarios are analyzed for planning purposes. Decisions are reviewed in context. These exercises do not seek to assign blame. They aim to improve future responses. The original records serve as the foundation for this learning, demonstrating how information was handled at the time. Families sometimes continue their own records. They keep copies of reports, maps, and correspondence. When new information arises, families may provide it to agencies, adding to the existing record. The interaction between personal and official documentation becomes part of the case history. Records outlast the conditions under which they were created. Weather changes, terrain shifts, personnel retire or transfer. The file remains. It is consulted when questions arise and set aside when none do. Its existence does not imply resolution. It implies continuity. In Alaska's backcountry cases, this continuity can span decades. A disappearance from the 1970s may still exist as an active entry in a database. The landscape described in the file may no longer look the same. Rivers may have changed course. Trails may have vanished. The record preserves a moment in time, fixed against a changing environment. The endurance of documentation shapes expectations. It allows agencies to respond consistently when inquiries arise. It enables comparisons across cases. It provides a stable reference in a setting defined by change. The search itself may have been brief or extensive. The record remains regardless. What is written becomes the lasting representation of the event. It carries forward the known facts, the uncertainties, and the limits encountered. In the absence of discovery, the record is what endures. Recovery is governed by conditions, not effort. In some cases, the location of a missing person becomes known while recovery remains impossible. This distinction appears repeatedly in Alaska backcountry records. It is noted without emphasis, often as a brief statement in an incident summary. Coordinates are listed, observations are recorded, no retrieval follows. The limitation is not a lack of willingness or preparation. It is the presence of conditions that cannot be altered. Steep terrain is a common factor. High-angle slopes, unstable rock faces, and ice-covered walls restrict access even to experienced technical teams. In mountainous regions, a fall may carry a person into terrain that cannot be approached from above or below without exposing rescuers to extreme risk. Rope systems require secure anchor points, which may not exist. Helicopter hoist operations depend on wind, visibility, and clearance that steep walls often do not provide. When these elements do not align, recovery is deferred indefinitely. Glacial environments present separate constraints. Crevasses conceal depth and width beneath thin snow bridges. Movement across these surfaces requires specialized equipment and constant assessment. Even when a location is identified visually, approaching it may place teams directly over hidden voids. Seasonal change alters stability. A site reachable one year may become inaccessible the next. In such settings, recovery attempts are weighed against the probability of secondary casualties. Water complicates recovery in different ways. Swift rivers carry debris downstream, dispersing remains and equipment across long distances. Cold temperatures slow decomposition but increase hazards for divers and boat crews. Turbidity reduces visibility to near zero. In coastal and tidal areas, currents shift rapidly and access windows are brief. When conditions exceed safe operating limits, operations are postponed or cancelled. These decisions are documented plainly, with reference to water speed, temperature, and visibility. Avalanche terrain introduces unpredictability. Slopes that appear stable can release without warning due to temperature change or wind loading. Recovery teams monitor forecasts and snowpack data continuously. Even with detailed analysis, risk cannot be eliminated. In some cases, known locations remain untouched because repeated avalanche cycles make access unsafe. The terrain itself dictates the boundary. Weather compounds all of these factors. High winds prevent aircraft from hovering or landing. Low clouds obscure visual confirmation. Sudden storms cut off routes and delay extraction. In Alaska, weather systems can persist for days or weeks. A recovery planned within a narrow window may be cancelled repeatedly. Over time, the cumulative effect of these delays shifts the feasibility of retrieval. Equipment limitations also play a role. Heavy lifting requires aircraft capable of operating at altitude and in confined spaces. Even when available, fuel range and payload capacity impose limits. Ground-based retrieval may require cutting paths through dense vegetation or stabilizing loose rock, tasks that increase exposure, time, and risk. These constraints are assessed methodically. Human factors are considered alongside environmental ones. Fatigue affects judgment. Cold exposure reduces dexterity. Prolonged operations strain personnel physically and mentally. Search and rescue doctrine emphasizes the safety of responders as a priority. This principle guides decisions to suspend or forego recovery when conditions exceed acceptable thresholds. The language used reflects this priority rather than the outcome. In official records, recovery status is separated from discovery status. A person may be located without being recovered. This distinction is important for both operational planning and record keeping. It acknowledges certainty about location while recognizing the limits of action. Families are informed using precise terms that avoid implication beyond what is known. Over time, some conditions improve. Glaciers retreat, water levels drop, vegetation changes. In rare instances, remains become accessible years later due to environmental shifts. When this occurs, agencies review existing records to reassess feasibility. These opportunities arise unpredictably and cannot be scheduled. They depend on factors outside human control. Recovery decisions are revisited periodically, but they are not reopened lightly. Each reassessment considers current conditions against the original risk factors. Advances in equipment or technique may alter the balance slightly. More often, the same constraints persist. The decision remains unchanged, recorded again with updated context. Public understanding of recovery often assumes persistence will overcome obstacles. In Alaska's backcountry, persistence operates within narrow margins. Effort does not reshape terrain, it responds to it. When retrieval cannot be completed safely, the limitation is noted without further elaboration. These cases remain part of official records, marked by clarity about what is known and restraint about what cannot be done. The absence of recovery does not imply uncertainty about events. It reflects an environment that sets firm boundaries. Conditions govern outcomes quietly. They do so without regard for planning, experience, or resources. Recovery proceeds only when those conditions allow. Some locations never re-enter the search cycle. Certain areas appear in case files only once. They are marked during an initial assessment, discussed briefly during planning, and then left unchanged in all later documentation. These locations do not disappear from records, but they do not re-enter active consideration. The reasons are not procedural oversights. They are tied to geography, access, and the way conditions persist over long periods in Alaska's backcountry. These locations are often defined by a combination of remoteness and physical constraint. A narrow canyon with sheer walls may allow visual confirmation from the air, but no safe route for descent. A steep cirque filled with unstable rock may be reachable only by traversing terrain that exposes responders to unacceptable risk. In such cases, the area is logged, described, and assigned a status that reflects its inaccessibility. Once recorded, that status rarely changes. Time does not affect all terrain equally. Some environments remain effectively static across decades. High-angle slopes do not soften with familiarity. Cliff bands do not gain safer approaches through repetition. In Alaska's mountain regions, freeze-thaw cycles loosen rock rather than stabilize it. Snow accumulation adds weight and unpredictability. These processes reinforce barriers rather than erode them. When a location is deemed unsafe during one season, it often remains unsafe in subsequent years. Search planning accounts for this early. During initial mapping, planners identify areas that can be searched immediately, areas that may become accessible later, and areas that are unlikely to ever be entered. This categorization is not emphasized in public summaries, but it appears in internal notes. The purpose is practical. Resources are allocated towards zones where effort can produce information. Areas that cannot be reached are acknowledged but not prioritized. Glacial features contribute significantly to this permanence. Crevasse fields shift slowly but remain hazardous. Seracs collapse unpredictably. Snow bridges form and fail without warning. Even with improved equipment and experience, these features resist safe access. When a location lies within such terrain, it may be observed repeatedly without physical entry. Each observation confirms presence without enabling action. Over time, these confirmations accumulate without altering the status of the site. Water environments create similar effects. Deep river gorges, fast-moving channels, and areas influenced by tidal forces resist sustained search activity. Seasonal variation does not guarantee improvement. High water replaces low water, ice replaces flow, and each condition introduces its own hazards. A location within such an environment may be theoretically reachable during narrow windows, but those windows may not align with staffing, daylight, or weather. When attempts fail repeatedly, the area falls out of the active search cycle. The concept of revisiting assumes that conditions will change favorably. In many cases, they do not. A cliff face does not become less vertical. A canyon does not widen. Vegetation may grow denser rather than thinner. In these settings, reevaluation does not produce new options. The original assessment remains valid, and planners record that continuity explicitly. Administrative review reinforces this stability. During periodic case reviews, agencies reassess unresolved locations to determine whether any new factor warrants renewed effort. These reviews consider environmental change, technological advances, and resource availability. In the majority of cases, the conclusion is brief. Conditions remain unchanged. No new access is identified. The location remains categorized as inaccessible. The review is logged, and the case status remains the same. Technology has expanded observation, but not entry. High-resolution imagery, improved optics, and aerial platforms allow clearer views of remote locations. These tools can confirm details that were previously uncertain. They can identify objects, terrain features, or changes over time. They cannot alter slope angle, stabilize rock, or slow water. As a result, improved observation sometimes strengthens the decision not to attempt entry. Greater clarity reveals greater risk. These locations persist in records as fixed points. Coordinates are repeated across documents. Descriptions remain consistent. Photographs may be updated, but access notes do not change. The file reflects this repetition. Each entry reinforces the same conclusion, stated in slightly different terms to reflect current conditions. Public perception often assumes that unresolved locations represent unfinished work. Within agencies, They represent completed assessment. The distinction lies in understanding that not all locations are meant to cycle through repeated search phases. Some are evaluated once, thoroughly, and then set aside because nothing further can be done safely. This decision does not remove them from memory or record. It removes them from active rotation. In Alaska, the scale of the landscape amplifies this effect. A location that remains inaccessible occupies a small area within a vast region. Revisiting it would require disproportionate effort relative to potential information gained. Search managers consider this balance explicitly. The goal is not exhaustive coverage of every square mile, but responsible allocation of limited resources. Environmental change occasionally alters access in unexpected ways. Glacial retreat may expose new ground. Erosion may collapse a barrier. Development may introduce new route. When such changes occur, they are noted. However, they are not common, and they do not follow predictable timelines. Most inaccessible locations remain so across generations of personnel. Records reflect this continuity without commentary. The absence of change is documented neutrally. A location marked as not accessible in an early report may carry the same note decades later. The language does not imply neglect or resignation. It states a condition. Families sometimes ask whether specific places will be searched again. Agencies respond by referencing current conditions and safety standards. These responses are factual. They explain what would be required for access and why those requirements are not met. From an operational perspective, these fixed locations serve as boundaries. This clarity allows search teams to focus on areas where movement and discovery remain possible. Without such boundaries, effort would diffuse indefinitely. The landscape enforces these limits consistently. It does not respond to time or attention. It maintains its structure, regardless of human interest. Some locations remain outside the search cycle because they never allow entry, not because they were overlooked. In long-term case analysis, these locations appear as constants. They anchor discussions about feasibility and risk. They remind planners that not all uncertainty can be reduced through action. Some uncertainty persists because conditions persist. The presence of such locations shapes the overall character of Alaska backcountry cases. It explains why some cases remain unresolved, despite clear information about where events occurred. It underscores the role of environment in determining outcomes. Once a location is classified as inaccessible, it rarely changes status. It remains noted, referenced, and acknowledged. It does not re-enter planning meetings, except as context. The search moves on, bounded by the land itself. Disappearance does not require isolation. Proximity to human activity does not ensure visibility. In Alaska, many missing person cases occur near routes that are used regularly, near settlements that appear connected, or along corridors that support seasonal traffic. These locations are not remote in the absolute sense. They are adjacent to movement, yet disappearance still occurs, and recovery is not guaranteed. Road systems illustrate this clearly. Alaska's highway network is limited, but along those routes, travel is frequent and predictable. Vehicles pass daily. Maintenance crews operate on schedules. Despite this, individuals have gone missing within short distances of paved roads. A vehicle may be found parked safely on a shoulder or pullout. Footprints may lead away briefly, then vanish. The presence of traffic does not translate into observation beyond the roadway itself. Sightlines are narrow. Vegetation begins immediately beyond gravel margins. Sound does not travel far through forest or terrain. River corridors present a similar pattern. Main channels may see boats regularly during certain seasons. Guides, anglers, and transport vessels follow established routes. Along these same rivers, side channels branch into areas rarely entered. A person moving away from the main flow may pass beyond visibility within minutes. Even when others are present nearby, the separation created by terrain and vegetation is sufficient to prevent contact. Airstrips and landing zones concentrate activity in small areas. Aircraft arrive and depart on tight schedules. Pilots focus on approach, landing, and departure rather than surroundings. Time on the ground is brief. A person leaving an airstrip on foot may move out of view quickly. The presence of aviation infrastructure does not imply surveillance. It implies access, not oversight. Settlements do not guarantee overlap either. Many Alaska communities are small and dispersed. Houses may be separated by distance and terrain. Travel between homes is purposeful rather than continuous. Residents may know one another well but still not observe daily movement outside established paths. A person departing a village on foot or by water can pass beyond the area of regular observation quickly. especially if travel occurs during low-light conditions or inclement weather. Seasonal activity creates the impression of constant presence that does not hold year-round. A trail busy in midsummer may be empty weeks later. A hunting area active during a specific window may see no travel before or after that period. When disappearances occur near the edges of these seasons, the assumption of nearby witnesses often proves incorrect. The area may appear active on a calendar, but quiet in practice. Search records include cases where individuals vanished near known routes without being seen. These records do not frame such events as anomalies. They reflect the reality that movement does not equate to observation. A person can leave a road or trail briefly and enter terrain that blocks sight and sound. Once out of view, chance encounters become unlikely. Weather compounds this effect. Fog reduces visibility even in open areas. Rain diminishes sound. Snow absorbs noise and conceals tracks. In these conditions, even nearby activity may not register. Vehicles pass without noticing a person standing or moving just beyond the road. Boats travel through mist without seeing shorelines clearly. Aircraft fly above cloud layers, unaware of what lies below. Infrastructure creates linear zones of movement rather than broad coverage. Roads, rivers, and trails function as corridors, not nets. Activity within them does not extend far laterally. A person leaving a corridor enters space that may see no other human presence for extended periods. This transition can occur within a short distance, measured in yards rather than miles. In some cases, disappearance occurs during routine tasks. Individuals step away briefly to check equipment, gather firewood, or scout terrain. These actions are common and usually uneventful. When conditions change unexpectedly, such as sudden weather shifts or injury, return becomes difficult. The short duration of absence does not guarantee detection. Others nearby may assume the person is still present or will return shortly. Search efforts near populated areas face different challenges than those in deep backcountry. The expectation of witnesses can delay reporting. People assume someone else has seen the individual. Vehicles or boats left unattended may not raise immediate concern. Time passes before a report is made, narrowing the window for locating fresh evidence. By the time a search begins, proximity no longer offers advantage. Noise does not travel reliably in these environments. Rivers mask sound. Wind carries it away. Forest absorbs it. A person calling for help may not be heard, even if others are within a short distance. This limitation is documented in incident reports and training materials. It shapes how responders interpret proximity. Artificial lighting does not guarantee visibility either. Headlights illuminate roads but not surrounding terrain. Cabin lights mark habitation but do not reveal movement beyond structures. At night, contrast decreases. Shadows deepen. A person moving away from light sources becomes difficult to see quickly. In winter, long periods of darkness extend this effect. Search planners treat proximity cautiously. They do not assume that areas near roads or settlements are less likely to involve long-term uncertainty. Instead, they analyze how movement could occur unnoticed within those contexts. Drainage patterns, vegetation density, and elevation changes are considered even when human infrastructure is nearby. Records show that recoveries near populated areas can take as long as those in remote regions. Discovery may depend on environmental change rather than human presence. Snowmelt reveals items. Erosion exposes remains. Construction activity uncovers evidence. These events occur independently of population density. The idea that isolation causes disappearance does not align with observed patterns. Isolation influences access and effort, but proximity does not prevent loss. Alaska's geography allows rapid transition from observed to unobserved space. This transition is a structural feature of the landscape, not an exception. Public response to these cases often reflects surprise. The assumption that someone near a road or town would be noticed persists. Agencies address this by explaining terrain and visibility rather than behavior. The explanation remains factual. It describes how little lateral coverage exists around movement corridors. Search documentation reinforces this understanding. Areas adjacent to routes are searched methodically, not dismissed. The presence of infrastructure does not reduce effort. It alters assumptions about where movement might have occurred, but it does not eliminate uncertainty. Disappearance in these contexts does not rely on secrecy or remoteness. It relies on brief moments when observation does not occur. Those moments are common. They are part of ordinary travel. When combined with terrain and weather, they allow separation from human presence without requiring distance. This reality shapes how cases are evaluated and discussed internally. Proximity is noted but not weighted heavily. What matters more is how quickly someone could move out of sight and what conditions followed. The landscape allows this outcome repeatedly. It does not require isolation to obscure movement. It requires only limited visibility and space to move laterally. Alaska provides both in abundance. What remains after attention moves elsewhere. Long after a search has ended, the locations involved continue unchanged. Rivers follow their courses. Slopes shed rock. Vegetation grows and recedes with season and fire. The land does not retain markers of investigation. What remains is not evidence in place, but information held elsewhere, preserved through records, memory, and routine administrative process. In Alaska, unresolved disappearances are rarely treated as closed events. They exist as active entries within systems that are designed to endure. Case numbers persist across decades. Names remain searchable. Descriptions are retained without revision unless new information requires it. This persistence does not imply expectation. It reflects a commitment to continuity rather than resolution. Agencies responsible for these records operate on cycles that are independent of any single case. Annual audits ensure databases remain functional. Periodic reconciliations check for duplication or error. These processes do not advance individual investigations directly. They maintain the integrity of the system that holds them. Environmental change occasionally intersects with these records. A glacial margin retreats and exposes material that was previously inaccessible. A riverbank erodes, revealing items embedded years earlier. Construction or land use shifts bring people into areas that had seen little activity. When such discoveries occur, they are evaluated against existing case files. The match may be immediate or uncertain. Either way, the record determines the response. Chance encounters play a measurable role. Hunters, hikers, pilots, and workers encounter remains or personal effects while engaged in unrelated activity. These discoveries are not predictable. They do not correlate strongly with search, intensity, or proximity to population. In Alaska, where human presence is intermittent, such intersections are rare but documented. When remains are found, identification depends heavily on preserved information. Clothing descriptions, equipment lists, and distinguishing features recorded years earlier become essential. Advances in forensic methods have improved identification in some cases, but they rely on the existence of accurate baseline data. Without records, discovery would not equate to resolution. Some cases never intersect with discovery at all. No environmental shift reveals new information. No chance encounter occurs. These cases remain unchanged in status. Their records are reviewed periodically, then returned to storage. This process is not marked by ceremony or decision. It is procedural and ongoing. Families often exist alongside this administrative rhythm. They receive updates when available and silence when none exist. Agencies maintain contact points and respond to inquiries with current status. These responses restate known facts. They do not speculate. They reflect the stability of the record rather than the passage of time. Public attention fluctuates. Media coverage may spike briefly following a disappearance, then fade. Anniversaries occasionally prompt renewed interest. These cycles do not alter the underlying case status. Records remain unchanged unless new information is introduced. The difference between attention and resolution becomes clear over time. In Alaska, the landscape enforces this separation. Vast areas remain unaffected by human presence. They do not accumulate clues through observation. They do not preserve paths consistently. The absence of disturbance does not signal emptiness. It signals continuity. What happened remains embedded in place without amplification. Search and rescue professionals recognize this reality early in their careers. Training emphasizes documentation as much as field skill. Accurate logging ensures that when circumstances change, the information required to respond still exists. This emphasis reflects experience rather than pessimism. It acknowledges that resolution may depend on factors outside immediate control. The idea of an ending does not align neatly with these cases. Searches conclude, operations stand down, records persist. The process shifts from action to maintenance. This shift is not abrupt. It occurs gradually as conditions dictate. The outcome is not framed as success or failure. It is framed as status. Across Alaska, unresolved cases accumulate quietly. Each exists independently. There is no composite narrative that explains them collectively. Geography provides context but not cause. The backcountry does not produce uniform outcomes. It presents a range of limits that affect each case differently. Over time, the accumulation of such cases informs policy and planning. Agencies refine intake procedures. They adjust public guidance about travel and communication. They improve coordination between jurisdictions. These changes aim to improve response, not to rewrite past outcomes. The records of unresolved cases contribute to this institutional learning. The land remains constant in this exchange. It neither conceals nor reveals with intent. It changes according to physical processes that operate on their own timelines. When those processes intersect with human records, information may surface. In this sense, unresolved cases are not anomalies within Alaska's backcountry. They are consistent with its scale, climate, and patterns of use. They reflect the interaction between human movement and an environment that does not prioritize observation. What remains after attention moves elsewhere is a structured absence. Names remain listed, coordinates remain noted, decisions remain documented. The space between them does not close on its own. The system continues to hold these cases, ready to integrate new information if it appears. Until then, they exist as part of the background of the state's geography and administration, neither active nor forgotten. The landscape continues its cycles. Records continue theirs. Between them, unresolved disappearances persist without resolution, defined not by mystery, but by limits that remain in place. Some places don't give answers, no matter how long you wait. If you want to keep exploring how terrain, distance, and limits shape real disappearances across North America, subscribe and continue with the next chapter. New episodes break down what actually happens after the search fades, using records, geography, and facts that rarely make headlines.